Thanks for having me. I am the international speaker, still getting oriented. International for me means that I flew out of IDC's headquarters in Boston, and IDC is very frugal. We like to pass the cost savings to our customers. So the routing for my trip, it went Boston to London, London, Singapore, Singapore, Sydney, Sydney, Auckland. And so of course on landing, as a trained research analyst, I said, first observation, find a better travel agent on the way home. So anyway, really delighted to be here to set the stage on this. So I was going through the agenda as I was waiting back here and looking at the various session topics, and accounted as I was looking for the number of mentions of the words innovation and transformation, very excellent conference-sounding words, and including my own contribution to that. Probably saw 27 different mentions of that word, so innovation and transformation. What I'd like to do is three things this morning. Is first to talk about transformation and innovation, but what needs to come before that, which is reconciliation. It's maybe a bit sobering, but I'll talk you through that. I want to talk a bit about how the CIO works with the business and some techniques on prioritizing that. And then finally, I want to talk a bit about one line of business that's near and dear to my heart, which is the CMO. One of my roles at IDC, I run the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer Advisory, and I want to speak about the CIO and CMO relationship quite in depth. So to get started, actually, before we start, I want to just pause. We're at the beginning of this conference. You're going to get tons of information over the next couple of days, probably overwhelmed with this. Where are you right now as CIOs? I think a good question to think about as you sit here, your mind is open, relaxed, perhaps time to take inventory. So innovation, transformation, reconciliation. I think we all want to innovate. Innovate means doing something fresh, something new. And I think to innovate, you have to have your mind clear. You sort of have to put the baggage down. So to innovate, I think you first need to transform. You need to change. You need to put some things aside or behind you so that you can do fresh things. And I think to change, you have to reconcile. You have to know, what do you want to change? You have to take inventory and accounting of what your choices are. So reconcile and then transform, and I think then comes innovation. So my work to prepare for this, IDC, we have 1,100 analysts worldwide that cover these issues. And my job over the past 2 months as I was thinking about this was to read this, codify it, and then put my own opinion on what I saw from all of this analysis. And I've got 8 areas, might seem like a lot, but 8 areas of potential reconciliation that I'd like you to consider as you start the conference. So the first of 8 is, I'll call it, where do you want to live as a professional? Now, you've probably seen this graphic before. We call this the third platform. And this really describes the past 50 or 60 years of computing. So the second platform is probably where most of us have spent our careers as IT professionals, certainly where I have spent my career. The second platform in IDC's vernacular describes enterprise computing, client server, internet and LAN computing, mostly computing inside the 4 walls of the enterprise. And again, probably where most of you, if you got a little bit of gray hair like me, have spent the 30 years of your career. The third platform is where we live today. This is computing outside the enterprise. It's mobile, social, big data applications, primarily external connectivity. So the first question is, where do you want to live as a professional? Are you going to live on the second platform? It's a great place to live. It's comfortable. We know the address. We know the people there. And it's quite necessary. The enterprise computing is very foundational. Or do you want to live on the third platform? It's a new address, a little bit more exciting. You may not know all the other tenants there, but I think that's really the first question. Where do you want to live? First reconciliation question. Second reconciliation is your relationship with the business, and one of the areas to reconcile is the whole issue of budgets. Now, you may have seen IDC speak about this before. We do a lot of accounting for the monies on IT that are spent by the CIO or the lines of business. And this would show the current accounting. So today, 61% of all technology projects are funded by the business. And you get to that 61% by looking at this right-hand side of the chart. 23% are pure business projects funded by the business. 17% are business projects by sort of off the books, right? Unknown, not accounted for. And 21% are joint projects. So 61%, and as you can see, on the right side of the chart, we only expect that to really dramatically increase. So maybe this is not new news. My own interpretation of this, I'm actually, in terms of the list of things to reconcile, not too concerned about this one. Budgets are very important, but one of the problems, in my opinion, it implies contention between IT and the business on who's funding what. And I think at the outset, the more important thing to worry about is, or to think about, are the activities. Not who's spending what, but who's doing what. And are the right departments, whether it's IT or a business area, doing the right things? So think about not doing budgets first, but think about activities. Third area of reconciliation is your position vis-a-vis the business. And I actually have a bit of a problem with often how we refer to this issue of IT versus the business. We actually talk about it as the business as if it were a separate entity, right? What are we going to do to serve the business? And I think one piece of advice would be to let's try to put that term aside, because IT is the business, and the business is IT, and we're partners, and we're not a service entity to the business. So let's talk about it as, when we use this term, our business, maybe not the business. Now there's, from our latest survey, 4 areas where the business has told us why they are increasing technology spending on their own volition. And these are quite important. The first thing they say is that my functional area is becoming more tech savvy. We feel more comfortable driving our own IT projects. Might be somewhat intuitive. I think it's helpful to personalize this. The reason that your business counterparts are so comfortable with these purchases really comes from their lives as technology consumers. And I think about the first time 20 or 25 years ago that I bought a personal computer for home. Think about how scared I was during that process, how little I knew, how long it took, days and days, how much power the vendor had during that. Now if I think about today, if I needed to order a new personal computer or a laptop or a mobile phone, I feel very comfortable with that. And it's that comfort level that your business partners are bringing into their enterprise purchases today. Second area is urgency. Your business partners really feel a lot of urgency today, and I think this stems from kind of organizational behavior. Maybe the economy is not as strong as everybody would like. They feel that their jobs might be in jeopardy. They want to move faster, a sense of urgency. I read an article about vacations in North America. Workers less likely to take vacations because they're worried that there won't be a job when they get back. So it's the sense of urgency in the workforce that I think also drives some of this. And also the requirements to incorporate new technologies into legacy systems makes it difficult for IT to serve that. And finally, the cloud computing, of course, makes a lot of the software applications immediately accessible and very accessible to the business users. So moving along on our reconciliation, what does the business want from IT? So our question in one of our surveys, when you work with your IT department on a new initiative, what role does IT play? And what they first want is recommendations on ways that my business processes can run more efficiently. And that becomes even prioritized ahead of the technology recommendations. So your business partners do want to perceive you as a consultant, a management consultant to their business issues. Next up, reconciliation. Maybe you have some of your own limitations. Ouch. Well, who was the actor? Clint Eastwood. He said, a man's got to know his limitations. So we all have limitations. What are some of the limitations in the IT area? The business people would say, IT does not track the return on investment on our technology. IT takes too long to implement the new technology solution. So some of this might sting a little bit or feel pejorative, but This is what's coming back. And if the business is sensing or perceiving these limitations from IT as a service provider, what are they doing about it? There's a bit of disintermediation going on, and our latest research shows that now within the business, you can see at the bottom, 12% of total employees are now doing technical positions. These are technical personnel right in the business. What are those personnel doing? The biggest function, technology management and governance, applications, infrastructure, tech services and functions, and then project management. So you can see the layout of what these business personnel are doing as they take over these technology projects. A couple more, finally, to reconcile. You need to reconcile your value. You have tremendous value as an IT professional. As I think about the role of the CIO and IT in the organization, you've got tremendous equity, tremendous organizational equity, proven track record, great credibility, great competency. And I think the final thing is the responsibility. If something does go wrong, a security breach, availability issue, who are people going to turn to? They're going to turn to you. So despite all these things that are happening, which might feel very disruptive, very disintermediating, you still are going to sort of be holding the ball, right? Holding the bag when the chips are down. So I think those are some of the sort of mixed signals, that we're seeing between budgets, responsibilities, people, and priorities. And finally, on the reconciliation, you need to reconcile what your own initiatives are for this year and beyond. This comes from our latest survey, the CIO Sentiment 2015 survey, just completed actually 2 weeks ago. And we asked global CIOs, which of the following actions are most important in the coming year? And right up front is, I want to engage business stakeholders more effectively, right? Create quick wins for these business partners. So the research would say that you're saying these things. You really want to move more from being a technical person to a business person. So that's the opportunity in your own process of reconciliation and then transformation and innovation. Okay, so with that, how do you start to think about and then prioritize your relationship with the business or the relationship with our business or my business? So one recommendation that I have for you is to understand the business is personas. And of course, a persona is a cardboard cutout of the person that you want to serve. I actually work with a lot of CMOs, and if you go through the offices of the marketing areas at the vendors, they will actually have these personas cut out. So, it's a little bit cheeky, but this is the way that they start. I'm actually not recommending that, but you do need to think about the roles and the personas that you want to serve. Did you know that you are a persona? So the CIO persona would be one that your vendors stand up for you, and they really do try to understand what's in your heart and your mind. What size shirts do you wear? What are your budgets? And that's the beginning. So think about making your own personas and then prioritizing them. I would not recommend that you sort of think monolithically about your end users sitting in front of their computers and trying to muck things up for you. Let's go a little bit deeper to make your own personas. So the traditional roles of the personas that you need to serve are many, and we've got sort of a concentric view of these traditional personas, starting with the IT executives, CIOs, IT strategy and planning, sourcing, and so forth. The next concentric ring are what we call the IT influencers, application services, communications, infrastructure, architecture, and information. So the concentric rings of personas are expanding. And then now finally on top of that, especially over the past couple of years, the lines of business influencers. And now we've got roles or personas all around the organization, from sales and marketing to finance, and then we've got various industry requirements. So if you count up the number of potential roles or personas that you might need to serve as an IT executive, there's probably about 127 different roles here, and clearly too much to take on. You're not going to be able to make everyone happy, just too many mouths to feed. So how do you prioritize? So in my work in the executive advisory, one of the things that I hear a lot about are these emerging C-level roles. And over the years, I've been a little bit cautious when I hear about these, what I call the C-level name of the day or the name of the year. Chief Digital Officer, very current right now. We hear a lot about the CDO. Chief of Products, the Chief Revenue Officer, the Chief Customer Experience Officer. Now, these all may be real and valid roles, but my advice to you would be to not think about the role so much, but to think about the activities underlying those roles. Who's doing what? Because in some of these cases, these are merely new titles for existing functions. So for example, the Chief Customer Experience Officer, actually this was a role that was very popular 5 or 6 years ago. But in many companies, what this was just a retitling of a current position. So it was the Head of Customer Service, now called the Customer Experience Officer. Now interestingly, that role kind of faded for a few years because there wasn't a solid fix on the position. But today, the Customer Experience Officer is coming back as a very valid role. And so let me tell you why. So there's a couple ways to look at this Customer Experience Officer role. One way that I would think about it would be the experience of the customer as you process that customer's work with you inside the 4 walls of your organization. So I would say, think about stapling yourself to a customer order or to the progression of a customer as you turn them into a customer. So the first place that you touch the customer is with your marketing activities. You're going to do campaigns and programs. That prospect will become a customer, raise my hand. Now that customer is going to buy something. That's the sales function. The customer has purchased something. Now you've got to bill them. You've got to deliver product. You're going to have to service them. And then finally, you're going to try to analyze your work with that customer over some period of years. You want to do financial analysis. So this is really a string of experience, each of which are supported by IT systems, right? We have our marketing systems for creation, our selling systems, order fulfillment, billing, customer service. So I think one of the areas for IT in this age of reconciliation is to think about all of these separate systems that the business is putting up to track this progress and to think, who is the unifying function for the customer record? Because if you have a different customer record that starts in marketing and it passes to sales and the record's somewhat modified, and then down the line, you're not going to be able to do an analysis on the lifetime value of that customer as it passes from department to department. So I think a very real role for IT today, with all of this business independency in their own systems, is to think about the interdepartmental impact. So that's one way to think about the customer experience area. Another framework for thinking about who you want to serve in the business is to think about which of the areas are going to have the greatest amount of change. And in one of our surveys, we looked at all of the various departments within an organization, and it turns out that of all the areas that are facing the greatest IT change, marketing, the marketing systems are seen to have the greatest rate of change, ahead of security and risk, sales, and so forth. You know, when you think about this chart, it's interesting, you know, as an analyst, I say, why is this? Why is it now that marketing as a function is the latest area to get the benefits of automation? Why is marketing the last functional bastion, really, in the organization? And as you think about the history of applications, I think about going way back into the late 70s or early 80s. Probably the first area to get the benefit of software was the finance function. And why is that? Well, you think every company in its financial operations really has the exact same keystrokes of closing the books every month, doing their accounting for revenue and profit. You know, very easy for the developers in the world to really put those motions into code, right? So that's why we've had 30 years of these financial applications. Now you think about marketing compared to the finance function as sort of the extremes. Marketing quite capricious in its movements. Sometimes the CMO and the marketing staff wake up one month and they say, well, what do we want to do today? You know, what's new and different? It's been very hard for the development community to take what marketers do and to put that into code. Now that's changing very quickly, but what's happening is it's putting a tremendous amount of confusion into the marketing area for the choices of technology, and I'll get into that. We finished a survey, an AP survey of C-level executives, and we asked CEOs in your region, what are your top priorities for the year? First, and some of this is not too surprising, first priority, operational efficiency and productivity. 2, cost savings, market expansion. Number 4, invest in sales and marketing activities. So here's my sort of sense of working with a lot of CMOs and CEOs. Marketing is a very difficult area for the company. It means different things to different companies. And actually what we're seeing in many companies right now is the CMO tenure decreasing from about 60 months, 5 years of tenure 2 or 3 years ago. It's now down to about 24 months. The pressure's really on for CMOs. And I think one of the issues, and I'm not going to be pejorative here, but I think many CEOs are not sure what they want from the marketing function. And because they're not sure about that, they're not sure who and how to hire when they hire a CMO. So it's a very difficult area. The marketing function is just not as crisp and clear as your CFO or your chief sales officer. Your job is to sell. Because marketing is a transformational area today. But they do know, I give credit to the CEOs, even if they're not sure what marketing should be doing or not quite sure of the job function, they know that it's a game changer, right? Because they've seen the disintermediation from other companies and other industries, and they know if they can't get the marketing act together, they could be the next company or the next industry, right, to be taken down. So how do we get now into the mindset of the CMO? This work comes from our AP CXO survey just finished. So the first is, what are the IT requirements from the CMO? And so we asked our executives, what are the top IT requirements that your department needs over the next couple of years? The first thing that the CMOs say is, we need help in enabling our multi-channel environment. Lots of words there. So what's a multi-channel environment? This would be one area where your business partner, in this case marketing, is using a language that you may not understand. And I think the first thing to building the bridge is to start to understand the language of marketing. It is a unique language. It's a special language. So the multi-channel environment can refer to a couple of things. One thing it can refer to is the virtual versus physical environment in which customers are served. And this would be especially true for companies that have multiple product lines, where they service customers and provision customers both in a physical and a virtual way. Highly competitive, pricing changes, features changes. Probably the best example would be, smartphones. Could you imagine a more competitive, dynamic environment that's multi-channel? The other thing this refers to are the execution channels through which marketers do their work, their campaigns and programs. One of the things to learn as an IT executive serving your marketing business partner is this marketing mix. Right? So these are, as you can see in these pie charts, these are the communications media through which the CMOs execute. And on the left are what we would call the traditional media, advertising and events, direct marketing. And on the right, we break out all things digital. So the average CMO today, in terms of his or her execution, executes about 30% of their programs through these digital media. And within the digital mix, there's close to 20 different types of ways to go to market. So this is the multi-channel environment that you need to understand when a CMO talks to you about these requirements. The technology that CMOs have available for them is, in my opinion, confounding. We've just finished a sizing exercise at IDC to look at all of the different marketing technology. We're currently up to 78 separate categories of technology for marketing, and within those categories, literally hundreds and hundreds of vendors. It's very, very confusing. And as I said, I work with CMOs day in, day out. There's an interesting dynamic. I think when you ask CMOs, tell me about your technology roadmap, your plans, they'll often say, well, we do have a plan, and here is the roadmap, but these are people, and they have pride, there's human nature, and I think that more of them actually don't quite understand what the technology roadmap needs to look like, and they need a lot of help on parsing this out. This is all going to codify pretty soon. We're going to go in the next 5 to 7 years from 78 categories probably to 8 categories of technology for marketing. And we're going to go from hundreds of vendors down to 20 or so valid ones. But in the meantime, your CMO partners in the business, I think, need a tremendous amount of help on this, and one way that you can help them to step up. In terms of where the CMOs are allocating their budget for those tools, the first is in marketing automation. So these are campaign management, campaign execution tools. Second would be in their execution tools for their media placement. Third, digital and social marketing, CRM and customer experience, and then sales enablement. So these are the primary tools that CMOs are budgeting for. We asked CMOs, specifically within those budgets, what's most strategic to marketing. The first being CRM, second, marketing operations, branding, B2B marketing, and this comes from our list of AP CMOs. And finally, IT leverage. We asked the CMOs, how do you leverage IT to drive your marketing strategy, programs, and campaigns? It's actually pretty positive. So 43% say we're going to go to the CIO office for this partnership and this help. 34% said we're going to source directly from the IT vendor. So again, this is the reconciliation that you need to work with your CMOs and helping them with these choices. Strategic skills that CMOs most value. The first is operational effectiveness. This includes marketing automation, process and alignment. Second would be partner collaboration and engagements. The operational issue is really paramount. When I first started studying the CMO area 13 years ago, I did an inventory of all the job functions in marketing, and there was no job within marketing that had the words technical operations or process operations. What's happened over the past 10 years is that about 8 out of 10 job positions in the marketing hold the title of marketing operations. So the CMOs are doing a more concerted effort of trying to bring more operational skill sets into their area. So the typical marketing operations area would include planning, budgeting, process improvement, and then the evaluation and deployment of technology. So they're doing what they can, but again, as I said a couple of minutes ago, I do think they're still, in many ways, limited just by nature, by DNA, in some of the technical skill sets, and really do need a strong partnership with IT. So that's the CMO persona. Let me finish my comments with a brief case study. I'm going to talk about one of my clients, Karen Quintos, who's the CMO at Dell, and then her colleague, who's the CIO, Paul Walsh. And when I speak about this, I'm not talking about Dell as a vendor. I'm talking about these executives as practitioners and the CMO-CIO partnership that, in my mind, exemplifies what this relationship should look like. The first thing, when I interviewed these executives, and I said, Karen, tell me about the posture that Paul has with you as one of his line of business executives. And she said, it's a new and refreshing conversation. So Paul has many mouths to feed all around the organization, and typically for most of the, sort of not legacy, but more of the mature functions, human resources or sales or finance, it's a very deliberate conversation, right? So the IT funding and requirements, very process-oriented, deliberative, very standard budgets, right? And this is sort of what you expect. You want this kind of stability from IT. But what Paul said to Karen is, look, when it comes to my conversations with you, Karen, around supporting marketing, we're going to start with a blank piece of paper. We're going to throw out any of the old rules or requirements. No SLAs. We're not going to talk about budgets. Because what's happened at Dell, at least between these executives, is this dynamic that they know when it comes to marketing automation and marketing technology that it is a game changer. And it's going to be a game changer. They may not know where the game is going, but if you're going to play the game by the old rules, heavy process and oversight, we may not win. So a couple of things that Paul and Karen are doing. First of all, back to that budget issue. And at the beginning of my comments, I said, perhaps don't think too much about the budgets, think about the activities. This is what these executives are doing. Now, of course, there's budgets for technology spent by marketing. Of course, there's money for marketing technology spent by IT. But Paul and Karen are not going to debate the budget. They're going to first think about what's the job that needs to be done, what are the areas that need to be improved, and then let's figure out who should spend the money and where the activity should be. You know, from the CEO's perspective, Michael Dell, and I spoke to Michael Dell on this, you know, it's all coming out of the same kitty, as they say, right? It's all coming out of the same fund, so he wants these executives to think about where it should be spent. This is a little bit of conflicting advice. I just told you not to think too much about those budgets, but the second thing that you should think about, and that Dell has thought about, is to take inventory of where these marketing systems are. Because you can't really move forward. Again, my advice on reconciliation. You need to do your balance sheet, your accounting on where these things are before you can move over. So you do need to do a breakdown of where the technology is. Does it exist in marketing? Is it from corporate IT? Or is it external? And from there, you can make your going forward decisions around what should next be on your roadmap. Finally, job 3, once you've done that inventory of the systems in place, you need to build a 12 to 18-month roadmap. And this chart would show from left to right the systems that are primarily owned and managed only by marketing to systems that need to be more managed by the IT area. And if you look through this, it makes sense, right? So if you think about, on the way left, for example, systems that provide web analytics and social marketing. Now, these tools are typically paid for, deployed, and operated entirely by the marketing area. And if you think about it, you know, if something goes wrong with these systems, if the web analysis function or the social listening goes down for a couple days, we're not going to have major company impact on that. There's not going to be interdepartmental ramifications or security risks. But on the far right, if our CRM system isn't tying closely into our order entry and we can't get customer orders entered, well, now we've got problems. We've got business limiting problems here. So the guidance at Dell is for Karen to work more on the systems that are owned wholly and solely and impact-only marketing, and for the CIO area to get involved with the systems that have interdepartmental impacts. So with that, our final slide, we did ask our CIO in 3 years, this is a good question, in 3 years, what type of CIO will your CEO define you as? And what you've told us is that I want my CEO to define me as the chief innovation officer, right? So back to our mantra, if we can first reconcile, transform, then we can innovate and be the CIO that our CEOs envision us in 3 years' time. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a great couple of days here and that you move on your own progression from reconciliation to transformation to innovation. Thank you.